The year is 2000. Sony's flagship follow-up to the original PlayStation is set to release, bringing in cutting-edge graphics and larger-scale games like we'd never seen before. At this point, Insomniac Games already had 2 fantastic Spyro games under their belt. The team's contract with Universal was set to end soon, and they wanted to not only conclude with a trilogy, but they wanted to make it bigger and better, sending Spyro off with a bang. The goal was to pack as much content into this final game as possible, an ambitious finale. Year of the Dragon released to coincide with the real-world Year of the Dragon. It is often seen by many as the best game of the trilogy. While the baton is passed back and forth between Ripto's Rage and Year of the Dragon, I personally lean towards the latter. Many fans have debated for years over which of the two is superior, a debate that is still strong all these years later.
But we all know what the answer to that question is. Hey guys, it's Miharu the Fox, and today I'll be joining Spex as we look back on Spyro's final adventure during his time at Insomniac, my all-time favorite game, Spyro 3: Year of the Dragon.
You could have warned me you were just gonna pop in like that.
I could have, but where's the fun in that?
Our story begins in the land of the dragons. Every 12 years, dragon eggs are brought to the Dragon Realm as part of the Year of the Dragon. The elders from the first game, Spyro and surprisingly Hunter, are sleeping while they await the hatching of the eggs, when suddenly an intruder emerges from a burrow. This mysterious female, alongside with a group of rhinoceros-like creatures known as Rhinox, sneak by the dragons and proceed to abduct the eggs. Luckily for our heroes, our thief here isn't too bright, stepping on Hunter's tail and alerting the dragons of the events transpiring. In an attempt to stop her, the thief escapes due to her small stature.
After that, we're immediately introduced to our main antagonist of the story, the Sorceress. The hooded girl, whose name is Bianca, informs her that she and the Rhinox have captured all of the dragon eggs, and after a passive-aggressive bit of praise, the Sorceress then instructs her to guard the tunnels leading to their world. What they didn't know is that Zoe, the fairy from Spyro 2, had followed them and was listening to their conversation. Zoe promptly reports back to an Elder Dragon about what she had seen. It seems the eggs ended up on the other side of the Dragon Worlds, also known as the Forgotten Worlds. Of course, Spyro, being the hero he is tasked with finding them and bringing them back, with a bit of help from Hunter.
We emerge on the other side and are greeted by our first homeworld, Sunrise Springs, a lush grassland with a large lake, bridged by a dense forest with the faint mountainous rock formations. It's here where we're able to get a feel for Spyro's controls. Spyro controls much the same as he did in Ripto's Rage. He can jump, glide, and hover, as well as all the moves that were taught by Moneybags, swimming, climbing, and the head bash.
Now, upon arriving in this world, your eye is bound to be drawn by the portal just ahead, leading to the first level, Sunny Villa. But before you can even think about entering, you're stopped in your tracks by a flying rainbow trail. This is our introduction to Bianca proper, and in true villain fashion, she tries her best to intimidate you into turning tail. But needless to say, we press on despite her threats. Also, I'd like to point out one of the eggs is just out in the open. So much for hiding them in places I'll never find, huh?
Your end goal is to collect all of the dragon eggs. There are a grand total of 151 of these bad boys scattered across the various corners of the Forgotten Worlds. Eggs will be required in order to power up portals for later levels. These eggs can be found lying around or by completing various challenges including platforming, minigames, and new to this game, alternate playable characters.
Each of these new characters you'll encounter is being held prisoner and closely guarded by your old friend Moneybags. How he even got to this world is beyond me, but he's still the same greedy bear we know and loathe. He of course will ask you to pay a small fee to have the critters released, and doing so results in their freedom and some much-deserved revenge.
It's here where we'll meet our first of the new characters, Sheila the Kangaroo. After understandably giving Moneybags the boot, she mentions how dragons used to live in the Forgotten Worlds before disappearing mysteriously over 100 years ago. Left to ponder this thought, we have the option to enter her homeworld and get a feel for her controls.
Being a kangaroo, she moves around by hopping, and her attacks consist of kicks and stomps. She's also unique in that she not only has a double jump, but a triple jump as well. I personally think Sheila's controls feel rather good. In fact, she's probably the most fluid of all 4 critters, though the short-ranged attacks may take some getting used to.
I enjoy Sheila. She's certainly the safest of the newcomers, as her gameplay feels like an extension of Spyro. Due to her emphasis on platforming, I tend to favor her more than others. She's the most harmless of the bunch and without straying too far from the Spyro design philosophy. She's a favorite of mine. The second critter you'll free is a small penguin named Sergeant Bird, a military operative packing heat directed at his captor. Bird is a mixed bag for me personally. While I don't outright dislike playing as him, I can never get a good grip on his controls. On the ground, he waddles around slowly and can fire missiles that usually lock on their target. It's when he's in the air, however, that I've always struggled. He's just a little too floaty for my liking, but he does get a level later on that puts his flight to good use. He can also pick up various objects to drop them, including bombs that explode below.
I'm pretty much the opposite. Sergeant Bird has always been my favorite of the four to play as. While his controls may be a little stiff, he's still a lot of fun. I just love being able to fly, exploring without limitation, dropping bombs down on enemies, and landing atop the highest point in Enchanted Towers just to appreciate the view.
The third character you'll rescue is a Yeti named Bentley, who, in a twist, isn't the stereotypical brain-dead type, but an actual genius using words that were likely too big for my younger self to grasp. He's still a brute though, and uses his strength for some much-needed payback.
One more, perhaps? At least.
Even Spyro knows he deserves it. Bentley is by far the slowest of the bunch. Given his large stature, it will take him longer to get from place to place, but his levels are generally smaller than the others to compensate. He can jump as well as use his club in two ways, to bash foes or metal chests, as well as spin it to deflect projectiles. He can also push large boxes out of the way. Personally speaking, Bentley was always my favorite to play as, at least in normal gameplay. Screw you, Yeti Boxing, I hate you! He generally seems to be the most hated character of the lot to play as, according to many online.
And I am one of those many. Sorta. While I don't think his gameplay is the worst of the bunch, he does fall into a category of types I don't like to play as. Chunky Kong from DK64, Murray from Sly Cooper. I'm just not a fan of controlling larger, slow-moving characters. Plus, it doesn't help that 2/3 of his missions are a pain. Looking at you, Whack-A-Mole.
Our final character comes in the form of, by far, the funniest character in the game, Agent 9 the Monkey. He's got a few screws loose, but knows when a certain bear deserves some punishment. But we'll come back to Moneybags later. Unfortunately, I find that Agent 9 is only good character-wise. Gameplay-wise? Okay, let me take a step back here. Agent 9 is presented as a third-person shooter with platforming elements. He has a blaster that shoots directly in front of him, or through a first-person view to get a better view of your enemies at the cost of movement. By pressing either shoulder button, he'll strafe left and right. It's only occasionally useful, as he automatically moves in the direction of whichever button you're holding. Agent 9 certainly gets the most variety of the lot, as each of his sections are played differently. He has on-rail shooting, top-down shooting, and Doom.
I love Agent 9, but as a character only. His controls are and have always felt horribly stiff, whether first person or third. Ratchet and Clank, this is not.
You might think we're done, but we still have one character to talk about. Sparks makes his debut as a playable character. Taking place in top-down shooter levels, you can only play these after beating each homeworld's respective boss. What's cool about these is that they grant Sparks new abilities, including taking an extra hit, breaking open gem containers, warping to any level, picking up gems at a farther distance, and the Gem Finder, the very same Gem Finder that you had by default in Ripto's Rage. You don't get it until halfway through the game? Yeah, no. Just gonna enter a little cheat here, and all is right in the world again.
Sparks as a playable character isn't a bad concept in itself. He has some cool abilities, and the idea that he's fighting in smaller areas that are too difficult for Spyro to reach is interesting. But good God, if there's one thing I hate about Spyro 3, it's a Sparks level. They're incredibly tedious to get through. I can't stand enemies that swarm you and back you into a corner, and to be honest, I don't care much for top-down perspectives in situations like this. But anyway, back to the story. After finishing the first couple levels, we're treated to another cutscene which shows Bianca following our heroes, trying once again to make them turn back by blasting Hunter with her magic. Spyro's not having it though, and counters by toasting her booty, which scares her away. Also, Hunter comments that she's kinda cute when she's angry. I'm sure this isn't setting up for any potential romance.
It's made clear from the beginning that Bianca isn't really an antagonist. Her hesitation to bring the eggs to the sorceress was already a dead giveaway, but it's once you're on your way to the next homeworld, Midday Gardens, that it becomes much more clear that she's no threat. The sorceress orders her to create a monster to kill Spyro, to which Bianca is clearly uncomfortable with, and will continue to develop throughout the game.
Just like in Sunrise Spring, finishing a couple levels in Midday Gardens gives us yet another cutscene with Spyro, Hunter, and Bianca. The sorceress in training is practicing her magic while our heroes observe, but one of the spells goes horribly wrong, prompting Hunter to spring into action to save her. Bianca thanks him, but quickly runs off when Spyro interrupts their moment.
As we arrive in the third homeworld, Evening Lake, things have taken a shift in tone. The previous two homeworlds invoked the feeling of adventure, backed by laid-back tunes. However, when we arrive at Evening Lake, the music has this almost melancholy feel to it. It starts out somber, but gradually builds up to something a little more threatening and mysterious. This is only further proven by Bianca's arrival.
Listen to me, Dragon. Spyro, this is serious now. The sorceress is planning a trap for you, and if she catches you... Believe me, you don't want to know what she's gonna do. Look, I promise to take good care of the rest of the eggs. I mean it. Just take Hunter and go back home before... I can't say it! Just go!
Okay, look. I know I've already talked everyone's ear off about this particular line, but I'll say it again. This is the single most important piece of dialogue in terms of Bianca's character development. This is the moment she realizes she might be on the wrong side, that what she's doing may not be for as good a cause as she thought, and it's so apparent in the way she speaks to Spyro. She's scared for him and is really trying her best to warn him that the sorceress isn't playing around anymore. If he continues rescuing the eggs, there will be severe consequences.
Upon completing half of the levels here, those consequences are met, as Hunter stumbles upon a trap and is taken away from us, making him inaccessible in some of the levels. You did play those levels before he got caught, right?
A little later, we see Bianca approaching Hunter's cage, lowering her hood to reveal that she's actually a rabbit. This gesture is also quite important to her character arc, as it shows her vulnerability. She's comfortable around Hunter. He showed her kindness, and she genuinely feels bad about him getting captured. We also get some backstory in the form of a flashback, in which Bianca explains that they needed to bring the dragon eggs to their world in order to restore the magic that was lost long ago. Or at least, that's what she was told, as we soon learn the sorceress's true goal wasn't just to bring the magic back to the Forgotten Worlds, but rather to collect the baby dragon's wings for an immortality spell. Needless to say, Bianca isn't having it and storms out of the room, going back to rescue Hunter.
By the time we reach the final homeworld Midnight Mountain, Bianca informs us that with enough dragon egg magic, she can open a portal to the sorceress, so that we can put an end to her plan. True to her word, she does so, and we put an end to the sorceress's plans. Or do we? Upon defeating the sorceress, we're presented with a series of cutscenes, giving us some insight on what our heroes are up to now that peace has been restored to the Forgotten Realms. Spyro still has some eggs to find, and it would appear Hunter has gone missing as well. Spyro visits all of his friends, including the returning Allura, asking where his cheetah friends' whereabouts could be. Everyone seems to know, but refuses to let their purple pal know until Sheila lets a comment slip.
Sorry, Spyro. Hunter made me promise not to tell you where they went.
They?
Of course, the they she's referring to is indeed Hunter and Bianca, as we see them kiss atop the roof of the fireworks factory as they watch the beautiful display. Spyro looks on in disappointment until Allura arrives, telling him to relax and just watch the show. A wonderful conclusion to the trilogy, bringing many aspects of the three together.
Now that we've discussed the story, let's talk about the levels. The level design is the standout part of this game for me. I enjoyed the levels of the first two games, but Year of the Dragon's levels blow both out of the water. The team's goal was to make each level larger than that of Ripto's Rage, and it shows. A brilliant change is how a level is structured. Given the scale of each, it can be easy to lose track of collectibles. You'll want an easy way to backtrack to collect things. Levels are now built like a ring. Once you reach the end of the main path, an easy path to the beginning opens, allowing you to circle back around to return to previous paths you might have missed. Due to the inclusion of alternate characters, at least half of the levels will have some small segment dedicated to one of your 4 allies. They'll typically have 1 to 2 eggs to grab in these smaller areas. Unfortunately, like Ripto's Rage, Year of the Dragon suffers from backtracking. You'll be unable to complete one level in each homeworld due to not having the right animal friend. That is, unless you know a few tricks and glitches that can allow you early access. Unfortunately, the double jump glitch is gone, but Year of the Dragon still has some interesting skips and glitches that you can utilize to make playing these games very interesting. Thanks again, Jeff! The other side objectives include minigames. These are where you'll typically find the returning power-up gates from Ripto's Rage, including Super Flame, Super Flight, and of course, Supercharge. Some standout minigames are the newly introduced skateboard segments, where you'll be performing various tasks while pulling off some sick tricks, Tony Hawk style.
Something else this game expands on is mini-bosses. In Spyro 2, the level Metropolis had a mission in which you needed to defeat an ox. That was the introduction to this concept. Year of the Dragon gives us 3 missions similar to this: Bluto in Seashell Shore, Sleepyhead in Spooky Swamp, and the Twin Dragons in Fireworks Factory. The latter 2 are actually some of my favorite challenges.
While on that subject, let's talk about the bosses. There are 4 total, and they're an overall enjoyable time. They're all presented as gargantuan beasts, courtesy of Bianca and the Sorceress. They utilize different ways of defeating them, such as charging Buzz into lava, shooting missiles at Scorch, and then there's Spike. Spike is an interesting case. He's often looked at by many as the hardest boss in the game, and that all depends on who you ask, as Spike is part of an interesting bit of programming. Year of the Dragon has what's known as adaptive difficulty. The game will become more difficult for people who go out of their way to collect more, while also making the game easier for those who struggle. This happened to me with Spike, as I died about 5 times before I noticed that it took less hits to take him down than the previous attempts.
Funny how this adaptive difficulty seems to barely be present with this boss. Good god, Spike is a nightmare. Having to line yourself up to hit him with the rocks before he blasts you, getting to the power-ups before he can fire that stupid blue-green laser that has me running around the arena all while avoiding getting singed by the steam that could come through the cracks in the ground at any moment and you don't even see it coming. I swear I could die to him 5 times or more and it'll never feel any easier. The only thing that will change is how many hits he takes. Suffice to say, Sergeant Bird telling me to fight the good fight now gives me PTSD.
Lastly, we have the returning Speedways. Every game up to this point added onto the existing formula, and Year of the Dragon is no different, as I feel this is where the Speedways were perfected. Once again, we have a time attack challenge, where you're tasked with flaming and charging all obstacles in a fixed amount of time. We also have the returning bonus challenges, featuring Hunter as a playable character.
These Speedway challenges are pretty harmless. Much easier than the ones in Spyro 2, I'd say. You'll be shooting down flying saucers, sniping alien farm animals, speedboating down a river of honey, and flying through rings. They can all be done with relative ease.
Lastly, we have the newly introduced races. Spyro is tasked with racing against other creatures in a 3-lap ring race. However, missing a single ring results in an immediate loss, so keep that in mind. You'll have to utilize speed boost rings and missiles to pass the competition. These speedways have some of the more interesting visuals featured in the game, including a harbor, a farm, giant mushrooms, and my personal favorite, a giant honey hive. The visuals of these levels are unmatched. Being a late PS1 game, it takes advantage of the hardware and delivers some of the strongest graphics possible. Given the sheer scale of the levels, there's a lot packed into the landmarks. Here the Dragon takes pages from both predecessors, bringing Spyro 1's fantasy elements and mashing them with Ripto Rage's more varied set pieces. No more do the visuals stand out than the colors and skyboxes. I know I've gone on and on about these in the past games, but Year of the Dragon's skyboxes are some of the most beautiful I've seen in any game.
If this game has one thing going for it, it's aesthetic. The Forgotten Worlds are home to some of the best looking levels in the trilogy. Each one has a unique theme and design which always keeps you on your toes as you never quite know what to expect.
Some of my favorite levels in the game are Icy Peak, with its brilliant use of the returning cannons, Spooky Swamp with its haiku reading dragonflies and moody atmosphere, and hands down, my favorite level in the entire trilogy, Charmed Ridge. The rich colors, unique reuse of the Magic Crafters gimmicks, varied minigames, and absolutely mesmerizing music. The soundtrack as a whole has seen a noticeable improvement over previous entries. Stuart Copeland returned once again to deliver some of the PlayStation 1's best pieces of music, though this time, he wasn't alone. Co-composing alongside Stuart was a man by the name of Ryan Beveridge, a composer known for backing scores for various television programs and feature films. The combined efforts of the duo have created some of the absolute best songs Spyro will ever know.
favorite soundtrack overall will always be Spyro 1's. My favorite individual piece actually comes from this game. Words cannot describe the joy I felt upon reaching Midnight Mountain and hearing this music for the first time. Just being here and running around to this funky beat felt like a reward in itself.
So, you collected all 148 dragon eggs and all of the treasure, but there's a portal that appears to be locked, claiming to not only need 149 eggs, but 15,000 gems as well. Wait, I don't have that many gems. Where could those money bags? You might have noticed that throughout this retrospective, neither of us have mentioned much of our main antagonist, the sorceress. Well, if I must be frank with you, it's because she barely has any screen time. Our only time directly seeing her is during the interlude scenes with Bianca. For crying out loud, there isn't even an interaction between her and Spyro before the final battle. Ripto was more involved with Spyro, but had little impact on the worlds we explored. The sorceress is the exact opposite. She never interacts with Spyro, but she has such a strong presence in the worlds we explore. Most NPCs will often name drop her as the cause of several issues the inhabitants are facing. She's a great example of the man, or in this case, the woman in the chair. Her presence is always known, but she herself is barely shown. However, Year of the Dragon has not one, but two antagonists. From the very beginning, Moneybags is presented to be an obstacle in your path, more so than he was in Ripto's Rage. As mentioned before, he's locked up your new friends in cages and releases them for ridiculous prices. More often than not, you'll encounter him blocking you from reaching various side objectives, and sometimes even finishing levels. He's a pompous jerk who goes out of his way to insult you anytime you deny him gems.
What? You don't want to pay? What are you saving your money for? Another sequel?
Even if you do pay him, he'll still find ways to get under your skin.
Head on in, Spyro. It should be a thrilling match. In fact, I've even placed a little wager on the Rhinoc team. Let's just hope the local team doesn't have any last-minute accidents.
As we touched on before, every time you free a friend, they get their revenge on Moneybags by delivering some much-deserved payback. You wish you too could bring the pain. Well, for those of you who have gone out of your way to collect everything up to that point, you will be rewarded handsomely.
After defeating the sorceress, you'll return to Midnight Mountain, where you'll find Moneybags on the bridge. He has the final egg in his possession, which he of course plans to sell for a fortune. But Spyro's had enough.
At the end of Ripto's Rage, you were given back all of your hard-earned gems thanks to Hunter. He beat Moneybags up and returned them to you. This time, however, you get to earn them back yourself. In a sweet twist, you, the player, get to chase Moneybags down and charge or flame him repeatedly, each hit returning several gems to your wallet. This chase is by and large the best reward for completion the series has ever seen up to this point. The best part? All the gems are the delicious yellow 10s and purple 25s.
With the last egg and all your gems returned to you, you can now enter the bonus level, lazily called the Super Bonus Round. Bianca tells you that this is where the sorceress kept all her treasure, and now it's yours for the taking. If you can chase down all of the thieves, that is.
I still prefer Nasty's loot, but this is better than Dragon Shores personally. Though I'm not a fan of the Yeti race, and I never liked the submarine and Lost Fleet, but flaming down UFOs with Super Flight and Super Flame is a ton of fun. After collecting all the gems, you unlock the final door and discover that the sorceress is still alive.
This is an aerial battle, much like the final phase of Ripto's fight. But whereas that one was intense and really felt like a climactic fight, this one is a joke. All you do is fly back and forth shooting her with the laser cannon. It's boring, but the yin-yang egg is a nice reward.
After sending the sorceress to her doom a second time, we're greeted by the final cutscene. The dragon hatchlings are free and experiencing the first moments of life with the dragon elders. It's a cute ending to say the least, albeit not really worth the effort of completing. Year of the Dragon is a wonderful finale to an excellent trilogy. It's much larger in scope, provides a variety of different gameplay styles with some of PlayStation's best visuals. It's backed by one of the greatest soundtracks I've ever listened to. It has a much more engaging story than what came before it. It's genuinely my favorite game in the Spyro series, and a game that I've come back to all the time.
As I said at the beginning, this is my all-time favorite game. Not just for Spyro, but in general. When we got our first look at a remade cutscene in Reignited, I was in tears due to just how many memories it brought back. Year of the Dragon inspired me to create many stories of my own and set the foundation for the types of platformers I would play in later years.
I respect Insomniac for the efforts that they put in to send Spyro off with a bang, and can feel the passion behind this project. And if you go to a certain feature that I once again neglected to talk about because I'm an idiot, skill points were a thing in Ripto's Rage. By completing these random little objectives that were pretty ambiguous to say the least, you could unlock skill points, and you would get an epilogue in Ripto's Rage, but it's not anything too special. However, you can do it once again in Year of the Dragon, and if you do so, you're treated to another epilogue. Like before, we get to see what our lovable characters are up to after the ending, including Ripto and Nasty Nork surviving their defeats and plotting their next plan. Once you reach the end, you're greeted by the final page, an image with our main cast thanking the player. This isn't just the characters thanking you, but Insomniac thanking their fans for their support throughout the trilogy. It's a wonderful farewell to a wonderful trilogy of games. It's a bit unfortunate that Insomniac had to let go of the Spyro IP after this game. While the series continued to get new games in the coming years, they were a mixed bag, to put it bluntly. Perhaps one day, we'll take a look at them. But until then, this will conclude the retrospective on the Spyro trilogy. Thanks for joining me today, Miharu. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Specs.
And until next time, have yourselves a wonderful night. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. And I'll see you guys next time.